New Jersey homes are getting more expensive even as paychecks stretch thin. The median price across the state climbed to $525,000 last year, up 5.4%, while in some towns, values jumped by well over $100 million in just 12 months. Set the scene. It's early 2026. From Camden and Cherry Hill to Trenton and the Shore, buyers are still chasing scarce listings. Many homeowners sit on mortgages near 4%. Market rates rose as high as 7.8% and now drift lower. That lock, the distance between 4 and nearly 8, kept would-be sellers frozen in place. It throttled inventory, it rerouted ambition, and it funneled demand into the homes that did hit the market. The numbers do not whisper. They shout. Last year ended with demand steady, and expectations now tilt toward more buyers stepping forward as rates ease. Yet the most visible price spikes are not evenly spread. New Jersey's sharpest one-year gains concentrate in coastal enclaves and affluent commuter towns, places with the shortest supply and the strongest bidding. Start at the Shore. In Deal, the typical home value reached about $4,212,865 in January, rising by $412,280 in just 1 year. That's a 10.8% leap on top of a 91.0% gain across 5 years, an increase of more than $2 million since the late pandemic market began reshaping the state. To the north, Alpine posted a one-year jump of $321,208, up 12.2%, bringing its typical value to roughly $2,955,120. West along Monmouth County's beaches, Seagirt rose by $211,955 in a year, 10.1%, to a typical value of about $2,304,930, with a 5-year gain of $1,012,680, $9. Along Barnegat Bay and the Barrier Islands, the tide runs the same direction. Bayhead climbed by $240,903 year over year, or 11.4%, to approximately $2,362,175. Mantoloking advanced by $149,133 in 12 months, 8.2%, to about $1,969,772. Harvey Cedars increased by $151,054, 7.7%, to around $2,112,184. Long Beach Township rose by $82,236, 4.4%, to roughly $1,970,933. Beach Haven ticked up $78,198, 5.0%, to about $1,633,544. Barnegat Light gained $72,838, 4.8%, to something close to $1,581,993. And Strathmere, a pocket of Cape May County, added $68,500, 4.7%, to land near $1,535,084. The same pattern shows up in Bergen County's commuter corridors, just over the bridge from Manhattan. Franklin Lakes rose $157,124 year over year, 11.6%, to a typical value of around $1,517,266. Demarest posted a 14.7% surge, up $180,632 to about $1,411,184. Saddle River increased by $226,124 in a year, 11.4%, to around $2,210,648, and Upper Saddle River at roughly $1,373,140 added $70,473. 5.4%, Ridgewood advanced by $82,214, 7.6%, to approximately $1,161,944. Wyckoff climbed by $85,284, 8.5% to roughly $1,091,109. Glen Rock hit about $1,011,530 after rising $70,541, 7.5%. River Edge, with a still lower baseline, jumped $69,621, 9.4%, to around $811,599. In Essex and Union counties, the story echoes. Montclair reached a typical value of roughly $1,102,512, up $68,186, or 6.6% in a year. South Orange advanced $77,944, 8.1%, to about $1,036,999. Milburn's Short Hills climbed by $138,052, 6.5%, to around $2,258,188. Essex Fells rose by $114,603, 8.9%, to about $1,409,218. Summit increased by $117,579, 9.9%, to roughly $1,299,787. Westfield added $77,572, 6.7%, bringing the typical value to around $1,226,968. Chatham posted a one-year gain of $101,726, 8.7%, to about $1,266,015. And in South Jersey, price pressure isn't absent. Haddonfield's typical home value climbed to about $807,328, up $62,505, 8.4%, in a year. Margate City hit roughly $1,056,909 after a $72,558, 7.4% increase. Stone Harbor stands near $2,477,217, up $95,422, 4.0%, in 12 months. Across the state, the biggest one-year jumps cluster in the same two geographies: high-amenity commuter towns and beachfront zip codes. Why? The causal chain threads through mortgages, scarcity, and policy. First, the rate lock. Many New Jersey homeowners carry roughly 4% mortgages. With market rates peaking near 7.8%, selling began to feel like burning money. Fewer listings hit the market. Fewer moves happened. Demand didn't vanish. It crowded into what remained. That's how you get a median price statewide at $525,000 with a 5.4% annual increase, even while affordability erodes. Second, supply friction. New Jersey's structure of home rule and exclusionary zoning limits new construction. A high regulatory environment stretches timelines and raises costs, which pushes investors elsewhere and chokes the pipeline. When homes finally rise, they often land at the top of the market, luxury by default. That's why a swath of Monmouth County coastal towns show 5-year jumps nearing or surpassing 60%, and in Allenhurst, the 5-year gain reached roughly $1,127,742, more than doubling values by 103.4%, with a single-year rise of $176,971, or 8.7%. The product being built and the product being resold leans upscale. Third, location gravity. New Jersey sits between New York and Philadelphia. For many, that's the whole point. Even as office norms shift, the pull of Manhattan remains intense. In November, Manhattan led the country year-to-date with about $7.3 billion in office sales, at average prices around $514 per square foot. 2 months later, in January, sales in Manhattan alone approached $1.3 billion, while local office vacancy there dropped 350 basis points over the prior year to about 13.1%. Listing rates in Manhattan ran a little more than $67 per square foot that month, towering over the national average of $32.55. That center of gravity matters for North Jersey. Commute calculus, school district preferences, and access to high-wage employment keep demand rooted even when mortgage math says wait. The office landscape frames the background tempo. National office vacancy hovered in the high teens, about 18.5% in November and 18.2% by January. Listing rates sat near the low 30s per square foot, $32.77 in November and $32.55 2 months later. The national construction pipeline shrank from a little more than 32 million square feet under construction in November to about 29 million square feet in January, down roughly 43% year over year. Yet starts in the prior 12 months ticked up to nearly 14 million square feet, an 18.5% increase versus the previous period, hinting at a cautious thaw. Coworking, meanwhile, surged. Operators opened 22 million square feet in 2025, up 16%, nudging the sector's share above 2%. Two-thirds of firms offering location flexibility found an outlet in this model. Signals suggest that flexibility could continue to loosen the rigid link between where jobs sit and where households buy, especially in places like Bergen, Essex, and Monmouth counties that already score high on livability and transit. The local reality for buyers is unsentimental. Many households simply cannot bridge the gap between prices and pay. New Jersey's affordability crisis isn't a talking point, it is a math problem. When the typical house in Westfield runs about $1,226,968, and the typical in Montclair runs around $1,102,000, even well-qualified borrowers find themselves boxed out. For first-time buyers in Bergen County, River Edge at about $811,599 can look like a compromise. For others, Haddonfield's $807,328 or South Orange's $1,036,999 play the same role. The price of entry keeps climbing, and the inventory at lower price points keeps thinning. Credit overlays complicate the picture. Buyers with less than top credit can still get a mortgage, but at a higher cost. That may mean a payment that starts manageable and then steps up, straining budgets and raising foreclosure risk if incomes stall or rates reset. The risk sits closest to those stretching for that first home or accepting non-prime terms to cross the threshold. In markets like Franklin Lakes or Demarest, where one-year gains reached $157,124 and $180,632 respectively, that stretch becomes even more precarious because the baseline is so high. Builders feel the squeeze, too. Timelines extend. Permitting drags. Taxes bite. In this thicket, many developers steer toward luxury, where margins justify the wait. That's how you get towns like Loch Arbor jumping by $231,775 in a year, 8.8%, to around $2,880,000, $432, and Saddle River up by $226,124 to about $2,210,648. High-end product clears. Mid-market product lags. Affordable product barely appears. The result is a state where the median climbs, but the distribution tilts toward the top. The broker landscape mirrors this tilt. In the luxury segment, one North Jersey team has surpassed $600 million in closed transactions, ranked in the top 1% of the state's MLS by sales volume, and represented 7 of the 10 most expensive residential sales across 2024 and 2025. On the development side, a Franklin Lakes firm carries more than $100 million in projects and uses proprietary software to compress build cycles from 12 months to 7. These are not outliers, they are signals. Sophisticated marketing, analytics, and capital stack discipline are increasingly table stakes at the high end. The result is a market where a previously stale luxury listing can re-enter and sell more than $250,000 above a prior list price after a strategic reset, while an ordinary starter home still struggles to show up at all. Not everything skews upscale. One Sussex County agent's portfolio runs from $70,000 to over $1 million, proof that lower-priced transactions still happen. But the outliers define the mood. In Allenhurst, the 5-year climb passed $1,100,000. In Seagirt, a 5-year rise north of $1 million. In Bayhead, a 5-year gain near $896,644. In Long Beach Township, up about $803,155 over 5 years. In Rumson, up roughly $791,149. Price memory sets expectations. Sellers aim high. Buyers stretch. Closing gaps requires either more income, more leverage, or more supply. Right now, only the last option directly cools prices, and that option is the hardest to deliver under today's rules. The state's property taxes are among the highest in the country. They add a persistent premium to carrying costs in markets like Montclair or Summit, where values already exceed $1,200,000. Taxes function like a second mortgage. They shape lender underwriting and buyer psychology. They reinforce the drift toward high-end construction, where the absolute tax bill feels more digestible relative to price. They also spur some families to widen their search bands to towns like River Edge, Glen Rock, or Haddonfield, where the price-to-amenity trade-off still pencils out. Policy sits at the fulcrum. Affordability is the central long-term challenge. State leadership faces a conundrum: raise taxes to cover rising costs and risk pushing residents and businesses, or cut programs and risk undercutting the very support systems that make New Jersey attractive. One potential lever: a community reinvestment law urging banks to direct more capital into affordable housing where they do business. Another longer arc: reforming home rule and exclusionary zoning that constrain production and keep timetables long. Without movement, even a rate decline may simply pour more buyers into the same tight funnel. Meanwhile, the office economy on New Jersey's doorstep is recalibrating. In January, Manhattan's pipeline included more than 2.7 million square feet under construction, while Boston and Manhattan together accounted for nearly 24% of the country's pipeline of about 29 million square feet. Sales firepower in Manhattan registered nearly $1.3 billion in a single month, and a single asset, Park Avenue Tower, changed hands for $730 million. Financing that acquisition required a nearly $270 million down payment to secure a $480 million loan, a sign that lenders remain cautious even for marquee addresses. Across the Hudson in New Jersey, year-to-date office sales through November totaled a little more than $1.2 billion at an average of $156 per square foot. The contrast is stark, but the interplay matters. Corporate office footprints, whether shrinking, consolidating, or going hybrid, influence commute behaviors, retail vitality, and where employees choose to live. Coworking's rise tilts this balance further. With 22 million square feet opening in 2025, the sector grew its market share above 2%, up 16% year over year. For New Jersey, where 2/3 of firms offering flexibility can translate into 2 extra days at home, that means a slightly longer commute is tolerable, and a larger house in places like Chatham, Short Hills, or Glen Rock becomes more attractive. Signals suggest that if hybrid holds, North and Central Jersey could retain the premium those areas have built over the past 5 years, even as the return to office debate ebbs and flows. Consider the 5-year arcs. Deal is up about $2,007,740 in half a decade. Loch Arbor is up roughly $1,387,939. Allenhurst has gained around $1,127,742. Seagirt is up near $1,012,689. Alpine has climbed about $1,003,916. Long Beach Township's 5-year rise nears $803,155. Manteloking is up around $768,669. Harvey Cedars sits roughly $829,465 higher than 5 years ago. The magnitude isn't a fluke. It's the compound effect of scant listings, rate lock inertia, restrictive zoning, and concentrated demand pouring into premium zip codes. It's also the downstream effect of a market where even at the median, $525,000 last year, the ladder's first rungs are tall. In this environment, the advice many hear is practical. Buy the house now, refinance when rates drop. With rates no longer at 7.8% and expected to drift lower, more sellers may finally unlock their equity. That's the optimistic read for 2026. More transactions, more movement, a market that feels less frozen. Even so, the math for affordability won't flip overnight. A 5.4% median price increase last year establishes a new base. In towns like Summit, a $117,579 one-year climb is now normal. In Demarest, a $180,632 surge sets a new floor. Those numbers stick unless supply changes meaningfully. Developers and brokers are adjusting to this world in real time. A Franklin Lakes developer's claim of cutting project timelines from 12 months to 7 through software and data analytics points to a race for efficiency. Luxury brokers assembling multi-platform campaigns to pull out-of-area buyers show how pricing power can be engineered when inventory is scarce. And one agent's record of more than 500 successful transactions signals that process and patience still move the middle market when it shows up. But none of it solves the root constraint: too few doors for too many bidders. Zoom out to the national office stage for a moment to understand the caution cycling through capital. In November, roughly 32.2 million square feet of office space was under construction nationwide, representing 44% fewer square feet than a year earlier. Projects in planning or underway represented less than 2% of total stock, down from about 3% a year before. Average national office sale prices hovered near $190 per square foot year to date through November, with some markets seeing average prices far below that, like Chicago at $64. These numbers explain why lenders ask for chunky down payments and why developers pick their spots. They also explain why New Jersey's own office market saw only a little more than $1,200 million trade hands across 11 months at $156 per square foot. Investors are cautious, and returns must be clear. Yet in the Northeast, Manhattan's resurgence and Boston's steady pipeline show where capital still flows. In January, New York's vacancy at 13.1% and listing rates above $67 per square foot show an outlier of strength. In November, Manhattan's listing rates clocked near $68, and combined with more than $7.3 billion in year-to-date sales through that month, the message was clear: the premier gateway still commands a premium. For New Jersey households, that premium reverberates as job security, bonus seasons, and an enduring desire to live near the core. The question that defines the next 12 months is simple. Does lower financing cost finally pry open enough inventory to cool price growth, especially at the high end? Or do lower rates simply invite more buyers into the same narrow lanes? Milburn, Summit, Westfield, Montclair, Ridgewood, Franklin Lakes, the Long Beach Island towns pushing values another leg higher? The answer will depend on the number of listings, not just the number of pre-approvals. Watch the towns with the steepest recent jumps for early signals. In Seagirt, where a 10.1% one-year pop added $211,955 to the typical home value, do new listings surge as homeowners cash in? In Bayhead, does an 11.4% annual gain of $240,903 encourage moves to mainland towns like Point Pleasant Beach, which itself rose $72,953, 7.6%, to about $1,037,703. In Saddle River and Demarest, do six-figure single-year gains entice downsizers to release larger homes back to the market? If so, price pressure could ease at the top, freeing up a chain of moves below. At the same time, look for incremental affordability efforts. If a community reinvestment framework nudges banks to deploy more capital to affordable projects in the places they profit, construction pipelines could slowly broaden beyond luxury. If permitting timelines shorten and exclusionary zoning loosens, mid-market product could reappear. Those changes won't flip the median price overnight. But over a few years, they could pull back the slope of those 5-year gains, like Allenhurst's 103.4% and Lock Arbor's 93.0%, towards something households can plan around. There's also the corporate wild card. Coworking's 22 million square feet of openings last year didn't fix office vacancy, but it did widen choices for employers. If two-thirds of firms keep offering flexibility and coworking shareholds above 2%, more employees will choose towns a little farther out. A 90-minute round-trip commute 3 days a week feels different than 5. That's how towns like Hayworth, up $106,944, 10.4%, to about $1,139,860, or Ho-Ho Kus, up $95,013, 8.3%, to around $1,237,421, keep attracting demand even as prices climb. None of this diminishes the strain for renters and first-time buyers. The gap between what's available and what's affordable is wide. When market-rate construction trends toward high-end and resale inventory stays thin, the entry point floats farther from reach. In New Jersey, that means more families with strong credit and down payments still failing to find something they can carry. It also means those who turn to higher-cost mortgages because they can't secure top-tier terms carry more risk. If payments step up unexpectedly, foreclosure becomes a possibility. That's the quiet danger hiding beneath big glossy prices. So what happens next? Base case, a steady year. Rates continue to drift lower from last year's peak. More would-be sellers, sitting on 4% loans but wanting to move, finally decide to list. Transaction volume rises. The median price continues to edge up from $525,000, but the rate of increase moderates as inventory improves. High-end towns that posted six-figure gains in a year still see firm demand, but bidding becomes less frantic as choices expand by a notch. Two watch items for the next 12 months deserve close attention. First, the unlock rate. How quickly lower rates convert locked-in owners into sellers. The gap between roughly 4% existing mortgages and the market's new offers will determine how much fresh inventory hits in Montclair, Westfield, Summit, and the Shore. If the unlock rate is slow, price pressure persists. If it's quick, competition loosens. Second, the policy pivot. Whether Trenton moves on affordability through permitting reforms, zoning flexibility, or a state-level community reinvestment law that channels bank capital into lower-cost homes. Small changes here ripple outward fast because they target the supply-side bottleneck that keeps pushing towns like Deal, Alpine, and Seagirt into new price territory each year. Amid these moving parts, remember the ground truth. New Jersey's draw between New York and Philadelphia hasn't faded. In Manhattan, office vacancy at 13.1% in January and listing rates above $67 per square foot underscore that the region's economic core remains strong. Nationally, office vacancy still hovers near the high teens, with about 29 million square feet under construction in January and almost 14 million square feet of starts in the prior year. Coworking delivered 22 million square feet of new options in 2025. All of it adds context, but none of it changes the fact that in New Jersey, a family looking for a home faces the same two questions: what can we afford, and how far are we willing to go? For those scanning listings tonight, the data offers a map. If you're eyeing River Edge at about $811,590 with a recent 9.4% jump, know that demand is thick there because it feels like value next to Glen Rock at roughly $1 million. $11,530, or Ridgewood at about $1,161,944. If you're chasing a beach place, note that Ship Bottom rose $96,115, 7.2% to about $1,429,294, and Beach Haven gained $7,298, 5.0% to roughly $1,633,544. If your commute points to Midtown, understand that a rebounding Manhattan market with nearly $1,300 million in January sales and a 350 basis point vacancy improvement reshapes office expectations and possibly your office schedule. If you're a policymaker, the levers are clear, even if they're hard to pull. Zoning flexibility, permitting speed, targeted capital for affordable projects. Without them, the next list of fastest-growing towns will read a lot like this: 1. Deal up $412,280. Alpine up $321,208. Seagirt up $211,955. Bayhead up $240,903. Saddle River up $226,124. Loch Arbor up $231,775. Allenhurst up $176,971. The locations may change at the margins, but the theme won't. And if you're a lender or builder, mind the lessons of the office market. National vacancy around 18% with a shrinking pipeline has forced caution. In Manhattan, a $730 million Park Avenue purchase needed a nearly $270 million down payment to close a $480 million loan. Risk pricing is back. In New Jersey's office market, year-to-date sales through November sat a little above $1 billion, $200 million at $156 per square foot. Those numbers remind us that cycles turn and capital is selective. In residential, that means disciplined underwriting and product that meets actual demand, not just aspirational demand at the very top. The state's real estate market is resilient. One industry leader calls it strong and expects a steady year. That red matches the data, a $525,000 median that advanced 5.4% last year, buyers re-entering as rates fall from 7.8%, and concentrated one-year gains in towns that exemplify the state's appeal. The risk is that resilience without reform turns into stratification, coastal and commuter zips taking flight while entry-level buyers watch from the ground. The opportunity is the opposite. Loosen the bottlenecks. Encourage capital to flow into attainable homes. Keep an eye on how hybrid work allocates time and how that alters demand from Maplewood to Mahwah. If the unlock rate accelerates and policy tilts toward production, the state can turn a luxury surge into a broader recovery that reaches renters and first-time buyers, not just those competing for oceanfront lots and leafy cul-de-sacs. For now, the story is plain. New Jersey's prices are rising because too many buyers are chasing too few listings, and the few listings that exist skew expensive. In Deal, the typical home added $412,280 in a year. In Alpine, $321,208. In Franklin Lakes, $157,124. In Summit, $117,579. In Montclair, $68,186. In Haddonfield, $62,505. The median stands at $525,000 after a 5.4% jump. Mortgage rates are easing from a 7.8% peak. Manhattan office vacancy sits near 13.1%. Coworking added 22 million square feet last year. The national office pipeline sits near 29 million square feet under construction. And in New Jersey, the choice remains: pay up, move out, or wait for more doors to open. Stay close. Over the next year, we'll watch the unlock rate and the policy pivot, two levers that will decide whether the state's median stays manageable or whether the next wave of $100,000 plus annual gains stretches from the beaches deeper into the suburbs. If you value clear numbers and straight talk on New Jersey real estate, consider subscribing so you never miss the next update.